Oh, hey, it's Emily, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books that I read in 2022. Not necessarily published in 2022, but I read them in 2022 and absolutely loved them. It was hard to narrow down this list, so there are going to be quite a few on here, but I absolutely loved all of these. I will also note my standout audio experiences of these books. I will make a separate video where I gush about some other narrators and some other standout audiobook experiences from this year, but these are some of my favorite books, and some of them did include fantastic audio experiences, so I'll point those out as I go along. But yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right in. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can for some of these because there are a lot to get through. So first up is Becky Chambers. Of course, Becky Chambers had to make an appearance on this list, and I absolutely love the Monk and Tea series. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about A Prayer for the Crown, Shy, and this is the second novella in this duology of novellas, and it really just centers around a non-binary tea monk who comes across a robot. Robots have left Earth but promise to come back and check on humans, and so this robot is here to fulfill that promise and just see what humanity needs and how humanity is doing. And so it's really these two characters traveling around trying to answer those questions and just having conversations amongst themselves. Very cozy, hopeful, character-driven, slow sci-fi story. I loved it. And so the next one I want to talk about is Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb. And this one, so these aren't in any particular like ranking order. This is chronologically just how I read them throughout the year, if you're curious. So Ship of Destiny by Robin Hobb, this is the third book in the Live Ship Trader series, which is the second series in the Realm of the Elderling overall universe that she has written here. I love this trilogy so much, and this was such a fantastic conclusion. It follows a different part of this world than we see in the first trilogy, but follows pirates and sea stories and port towns and live ships and live ship trader families and the politics between them. And live ships are made of a special kind of wood, and when three generations of a family die on its decks, then it gains some sentience, and so they become characters in and of themselves, which is pretty cool. And one of our main characters, it's a huge cast of characters, one of our main ones believes that she is supposed to be the one that should take over her family's life ship, but instead her older sister and her older sister's husband do. And quite a bit of what starts off the story is her trying to get her ship back. It's super fun. It's super fun. The next one I want to talk about is Loveless by Alice Oseman. It's a coming-of-age story that follows Georgia, who is starting university and trying to figure out what it means that she is aromantic and asexual. She doesn't really have that vocabulary at the start of the story, but it's kind of her journey figuring that out. This was definitely a standout audio experience. Billy Fulford Brown is the narrator, and I think she did a fantastic job. I felt so connected to these characters. I loved a lot of the side characters too. Just absolutely wonderful development of the side characters. And yeah, Georgia doesn't always make the best decisions, but I feel like you always understand where she's coming from. And just a beautiful coming-of-age story. And the next one I want to talk about was also a standout audio experience with Natalie Naudus narrating The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Sue Tan. And this one was just so fun. It was so fun. You follow the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and the Celestial Court doesn't know that she exists. She's been hidden her entire life. But she doesn't quite realize that her mom is trapped on the moon where they live, and that she can't really leave. She has a flare-up in her magic that draws the attention of the Celestial Court, and so basically she needs to make sure that she can protect her mother, and it goes on a whole adventure to be able to do this, and basically is trying to gain favor with the Celestial Court so that she can trade that favor for kind of protection for her mother and to free her mother from not being able to leave the moon. And it's just so much fun. It happens, it's a very fairy tale-esque kind of storytelling style. Things happen very quickly, but for me, it worked with this story. That won't always work for me, but here I feel like it really worked and really just kind of kept up the pace, kept me super engaged. I really loved our main character. I thought the writing was gorgeous. I just adored everything about this one. And yeah, next one I want to talk about is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, another standout audio experience narrated by Julia Whalen, who was just a phenomenal narration talent. She's one of my favorite narrators, and it also narrated the male's perspective, narrated by Zachary Weber, who I also think did a really great job. Here you follow people who come from two completely different worlds. You follow our main character here, who comes from a family of doctors and people who are in the medical profession and very high up in those professions, and kind of a legacy family in the medical world in this city. And the fact that she's only an ER doctor makes her kind of the black sheep of the family. That's kind of the pressure that her family puts her under. And she meets our other main character, who lives in a small town and is the mayor of this town. I will always point out the baby goat whenever I talk about this book. And really loves small town life, and they meet through circumstances and really start to fall for each other, but it's hard because they come from two completely different worlds. And although she is more readily accepted in his world, he is not necessarily going to be as readily accepted in hers. And so she's not really very open about how she's kind of dating this guy, and the interactions that he does have with people that she knows don't really go very well. And she's telling him up front that it's going to be very difficult for any sort of serious relationship to happen. She's also kind of working through getting out of an abusive relationship, emotionally abusive relationship, and also her parents don't really have a great model of a relationship either. So what she's working with as far as her models for a relationship and what she's been through so far are not great, and that kind of trauma is a huge part of the story. So definitely be careful if those are sensitive topics for you. But I thought the writing was gorgeous. I thought the character work here was fantastic. I thought it was realistic tensions and scenarios that would happen in situations like this, but you really get to see them start to work through it and communicate through it, and she's coming to some decisions about what's really important in her life. I love this one, is the point. Okay. It was fantastic. One of my favorite romances from last year. The next one I want to talk about is The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This was a super fun adult fantasy where you're following a few main characters. One is a thief, and she actually does something to help one of the princes towards the beginning of the story, and comes to the attention of the Sultan, who tasks her with retrieving a Djinn relic out in the desert. And so she needs to go on this adventure to get this Djinn relic, and so much stuff happens in the meantime. I thought it was so much fun. I loved our characters. Storytelling is a huge part of this, and I really love how that was incorporated here. I love just about every aspect of this story. I thought, it was a great mix of action, character work, slower moments, but also just twists and turns, and I just thought it was super fun. Next one I want to talk about is Beach Read by Emily Henry, which was also narrated by Julia Whalen and a standout audio experience. And this one follows a couple of writers, and January here is trying to come to terms with her father's death, and also the fact that her father had a mistress, and on the side, and she's going to spend some time in the lake house to write, but also trying to sell the house in the process. And is coming to terms with some things about her father's death and who he was, but also struggling through writer's block. She ends up she had one of the people next to her in one of these other lake houses is someone that she knew from, I think, college, and they were kind of rivals at the time, or so she thought. And they switched genres. They challenge each other to write in each other's genre to help as a way to unblock their writer's block, and they fall in love in the process. I love this one. It was emotional, but I think it was also really funny, and I really enjoyed our characters. I enjoyed their dynamic, and I just enjoyed the process that they went through here. So I was a huge fan. The next one I want to talk about is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. And this one you follow Nannerl Mozart, who was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's sister, real person in history, also incredibly musically talented, and traveled around with her brother performing, but could only do that for so long because it very quickly became unbecoming of her as a woman to actually have talent and perform. And so she needs to come to terms with that. And so this story is about them growing up and, at first traveling around, and then her getting closer and closer to the time where she's no longer going to be able to do that. But there's also a magical realism element here with a kind of fake world that the two people in history actually really did make up as kids, and talked about this kingdom of Beck when they were traveling to perform. This was kind of a made-up world that they really had, but Marie Lu takes a magical realism perspective to make it a real place that they actually can go to, and there are things happening in the kingdom of Beck, and the kids are kind of key to help resolve some things and figure some things out. And I loved this. I've seen some mixed reactions to this one, but I absolutely love this one. I love the writing. I love the magical realism element. I was so engrossed in everything about this story. And I'm not a huge music person, actually, but I was entranced by the music elements in here, the historical setting, I think, and them traveling around, I think, was super cool, and getting to experience some of the places that they went, I thought was a super fun element. Adding the Kingdom of Back as a real place and her interacting with characters from that world, I thought was super cool. I just loved everything about this one. And so if that intrigues you, I would give it a go. The next one I want to talk about is another one that I had heard very mixed things about, but I ended up loving, and that is The Last Apothecary by Sarah Penner. You follow a couple of timelines, one older timeline in the 1700s, I believe, and you follow an apothecary that helps women take care of the abusive men in their life. And so you follow this apothecary, and you also follow a present day timeline with a woman who just found out that her husband or fiance is cheating on her. And so she goes on, is it actually their honeymoon, some sort of trip that they were going to go on? She actually goes by herself and tells him to stay home because she needs to process and figure out what to do next. And so she goes to London, or I'm pretty sure it was London, right? And so she goes to London and comes across some relics from this apothecary, and is digging more and trying to figure out about what this apothecary was about, and just some elements from that kind of come into her life, and she just really becomes engrossed in finding out more about this apothecary. I loved it. I loved both timelines. I thought both were super interesting. I actually really enjoyed going back and forth between these different timelines. You're also following not just the apothecary owner in the past, but also one person who wants to get some medicine from the apothecary to take care of someone. And so you follow her trying to do that. And I just loved how all of the elements weave together. I was hooked. I thought it was so much fun. But some people thought this one was super boring, but I think I love books that I think a lot of people just find boring for some reason. I don't know. I had a great time with this one. Speaking of ones that were super fun, the next one I want to talk about is Twin Crowns by Catherine Doyle and Catherine Weber. This was one of my favorite YA fantasies of this year, and first of all, it's a beautiful Fairy Loot edition. I absolutely love this one. I just thought it was so fun. And you follow twins. One of them knows that she's a twin, the other doesn't. The one who doesn't know she's a twin is a princess. So the other one has her eye on her sister because she wants to protect. So the story also centers around witches. And so the one who knew she was a twin grew up in a coven and kind of grew up around magic and around witches. The princess, who doesn't know that she's a twin, thinks that her parents were killed by witches and has been trained to fear witches. And so there's kind of that battle going on. And so the one who was raised by witches, she's trying to take her sister, the princess's place, and take the princess out of the equation so that she can pretend that she's the princess and basically kind of change things in the kingdom to be more favorable to witches who are being targeted right now. And of course, just a whole bunch of things ensue, and it was so much fun. So you're following some of the court stuff going on, but you're also following the princess who was kidnapped and kind of taken to go out to this coven to be protected while her sister is pretending to be her on the in the court as a princess, and they both learn the prejudices they had and kind of have a more nuanced view of what's going on as they go through this story. There are some romantic elements that I actually really enjoyed in here, and I loved how this ended. I'm super intrigued for the next one to see what happens next. Yeah, definitely my favorite YA fantasy of the year. So the next one I want to talk about is Sign Here by Claudia Lux. You follow Peyote Trip and Calamity. And Peyote, they both work in Hell. Peyote has worked there for a long time and is on the 5th level of Hell, where things aren't quite as bad. And he is trying, though, to get a promotion and needs one more family member. There's a particular family where multiple people in this family have signed their soul over to him, to Hell, and he needs one more in order to kind of get this promotion. And you also follow Calamity, who is new to that level of Hell, and a new co-worker of Peyote's. And her history is kind of mysterious. He's finding out more about her history, but he also finds out more about how it intersects with what is going on with this family. It's so funny, but it also gets dark. It gets really, really dark, including some dark things that happen on page, not just referred to. So do be careful. Do check into trigger warnings. It gets dark. But there also are some really funny moments, particularly at the beginning. There's a murder mystery. It was just so unique and just such an interesting concept that I thought was well executed. And I just had such a fun time with that one, even with the dark elements. I had such a fun time with that one. The next one I want to talk about is The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. And this one, also so much fun and super interesting. Again, unique concept or kind of unique in where things went. So you follow our main character who works as an assistant to an editor, a book editor, and she's the only black girl in her office, in her part of the office. And so, you go through part of her, needing to be careful and trying to navigate that. There's a new black girl who starts to work for the office who quickly kind of becomes the office favorite. And so our main character is kind of jealous of this, but also it gets to a point where she's trying to figure out what's up with this new girl. And the more she digs, the more mysterious things become. And that's all I really want to say. I really enjoyed the writing. I really enjoyed our characters here. it also was such a fun look into the world of book editing. So I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And I just thought it was so intriguing. I was just just so enchanted and drawn in the entire time. So would highly recommend. The next one I want to talk about is none other than Babel by R.F. Kuang, and this one was incredible. This one is a dark academia story that follows Robin, who is an orphan taken from his home by a professor at Oxford when he's pretty young, and he is raised by this professor and kind of with the purpose of Robin ultimately going to this translation center at Oxford that is kind of the ultimate translation center, certainly in England. And magic is involved here as well, so silver is involved as part of the magic system, and the things that are lost in translation, like the nuances of what something means, and kind of the difficulty in kind of translating that whole nuance and meaning, and what gets lost in translation actually becomes part of the magic system, which was so incredibly interesting. And you follow Robin realizing like he enjoys his work, he enjoys being an academic, he enjoys being at Oxford, but also is starting to realize to what degree that translation center and his work are being put to use for colonial purposes by England, and kind of what he's working towards in that capacity really is having a detrimental impact on places like the places where he is from. And you see the racism, you see the colonialism, and he is struggling with loving and hating what he's doing and who he's working for, or what he's working towards. And so it's ultimately about him deciding how and if he's going to rebel against that, and kind of his process of coming to that decision and what he does. Writing was fantastic. Character work was fantastic. It was so interesting. Just such a smart book. And the ending was super emotional. It didn't ultimately make me cry, but it was very emotional. And I was feeling everything in this one. And so would highly recommend. That one is also a standout audio experience, narrated by Chris Lu Kum Hoi, and there actually are footnotes throughout it, which I think worked really well. And in the audiobook, they actually had a different narrator. Actually, Billy Fulford Brown, who I mentioned, narrated Loveless by Alice Oseman. She actually narrated the footnotes that are throughout the book, which I think was a really effective way of doing it, to have a completely different narrator. That way, mentally, you can kind of change tracks, know that that's a footnote, and kind of how to integrate that information into the story and then go back to the story. Very interesting audio experience, so would highly recommend. The next one I want to talk about is The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, again narrated by Julie Whalen, who I mentioned previously. This was the only book this year that full-on made me cry. And I love these characters. I felt so connected to these characters. It's about a mom and her, she has a daughter out of wedlock, and she needs to navigate basically being rejected by her family, but being kind of welcomed by the father's family. And so she needs to completely figure out how to become a mother, take care of her child. And this is set in the backdrop of the Dust Bowl, which is an incredibly hard time for her family who work on farms and own a farm. And so it's just, times are getting harder and harder and harder and harder. And she ultimately decides to move out west to California to see if that is going to be helpful for her family. And just the heartbreak that this family endures is just gut-wrenching. And as I said, I just felt so connected to these characters, and just you feel everything that they're going through. And her daughter is having an increasingly hard time connecting with her mother, because they're approaching things from very different perspectives and have two very different reactions to what's going on. But you see both of them start to understand more about the other person's perspective over time. And yeah, as I said, only book this year to make me cry. So I felt like I had to include it, because just if a book can have that much of an emotional impact on you, then there's something special about it. The next one that I want to talk about is The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is a climate fiction and talks about a fictional ministry that is established by the UN through the process of the climate negotiations under the UNFCCC, and a new ministry for the future is established. And in this, there are a group of people who basically are fighting for the future of humanity. And you see devastating impacts of climate change. You see the devastating impacts of a heat wave. You see all the politics that are involved and what the leader of this ministry needs to do to try to get things done. You also see people who feel like a more extreme reaction is needed and don't understand why the ministry can't get certain things done. And so you see both of those perspectives, the tension there. And I ultimately just thought this was incredibly interesting. You're following an interesting cast of characters, unique situations, but I also think the storytelling style was very unique, because you also just have some very random things mixed in, or some very random ways of integrating different ideas in. So you'll have some interludes that are just interesting conversations about some of the economic things that are going on, some of the emotional, philosophical, moral questions that are being asked, and kind of working through some of those. So it's not just, you're following the prose of characters doing certain things. You do follow that for a good portion of it, but there's also some other interesting elements integrated in. And I just thought it was an interesting and successful way of telling that story. And ultimately it's one that's just going to stick with me. I would love to get a physical copy and reread and annotate. So the final book that I want to talk about is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This was a fun audio experience. It was actually narrated by the author, who is actually an audiobook narrator himself. He's narrated quite a few other audiobooks, and this was a self-published book on Amazon that got the attention, so much attention, that it was actually traditionally published by Tor as well. And an audiobook has come out that he himself narrated. And this one was so much fun. This is a cozy fantasy. Again, I love cozy sci-fi and fantasy. And literally this just follows our main character, Viv, who starts a coffee shop. Like, that's the story. She goes into a new town and starts a coffee shop. There's a little bit of magic in there, but it's really just about her finding a place, setting it up, and kind of building this coffee shop and kind of working with the interior so that she can create this coffee shop, hiring staff, figuring out some challenges, but also figuring out the challenge of getting regular customers in a place that has no idea what coffee is. And there's also, some interesting things about her trying to fit into this town, fit into this world. And there's a bit of romance here as well, and just delightful, cozy, warm, put a smile on my face, and just made me feel all the feels. So those are some of my favorite books that I read in 2022. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if you had a similar reaction to them, a different opinion on them. I would love to know. And let me know what some of your favorite books were that you read last year. I would always love some recommendations. Or if some of these books made you think of other things that you think I might enjoy, I would also love to hear that. But thank you so much for watching. Again, I will leave my Instagram down below, as well as more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.